My older brother, who's 10 years older than me, has long since disappeared off the map, and my older stepsister, who's 13 years older than me, the last time I saw her would have been in May 1970 at my father's funeral. When I was 30, it was the last time I saw her, and we'd never got on. We were like strangers even when the family was living together. And because of the traumatic sort of upbringing, where everyone seemed to hate each other and it was a question of survival until you could escape, I treaded with a great degree of trepidation towards meeting her again. But over the past few years there have been a few letters saying, I'm getting older, I want to meet, and which can be seen as the sprat that catches the mackerel. But so I was dubious about such a rendezvous, but everything seemed to be pointing in the right position this time out when I visited the UK. So via my younger sister, we arranged a rendezvous. Equally, I hadn't seen my younger sister for 8 years, so we've all had disparate lives to fulfill and live. And it was like meeting a scary alien. You only know there's a connection because you've been told there's a connection. You know it from your past. But I'm very aware that the most important things are today and tomorrow. And the past was a long, long time ago, and it's left its legacy. And it wasn't as bad an experience as I thought it was going to be. Probably because I've experienced such a lot since I was 30 that it's hardened me up. But it's completely the accident of birth, as far as I can relate to it, that I have zero link with this individual. He was shot down a couple of times and survived, and then was put onto sort of ground forces. I always remember looking at him in the bathroom when he was shaving one day, and you could notice only in the mirror with the reflection that his face was slightly crooked. And it was because it had been reconstructed after one of the crashes. Otherwise, you were just used to looking at him face on, and that's how Dad looked. He didn't look abnormal, but you could see that. And he'd had a hard war, as did my uncles, his brothers. They were all frontline troops in the army. He was the only one in the RAF. And he'd in fact been beaten up by his older brother because it had been a long Pierce tradition to join the artillery in the First World War going back. So because he sort of dropped out of the tradition, he joined the RAF in 1936, years before the Second World War. He was taken into the garden, beaten up by Uncle George. I always remember that story.
Giddy giddy carousel, giddy giddy carousel, la 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 la.
I just had a natural call into history, art, what have you. In the late 50s, I was also very keenly attracted to music. There were a couple of shows on British television called the 6-5 Special, which was shown on 6:05 in the evening on Friday night, and Call for Cats. And I'd be intrigued by all the sort of early rock and roll stuff that was coming along then, and dance to it. I mean, that my parents were bemused and perplexed by the fact that I was obsessed by these things. One of my early recollections was a sort of odd rendition of Like a Rubber Ball, I'll Come Bouncing Back to You. And to this day, I remember the sort of studio setup of it, where these sort of girls were in these really groovy dresses, bouncing red rubber balls up against walls while the song was being played. It was the precursor to videos. You didn't get the real American stars on there. It was just dance troops dancing along to the latest American hit. And I was so disinterested in academia until later that the arts just had natural calling. My father was nothing less than supportive to me, but not in a direct way. He didn't. It was just little words he would say. would encourage, that as bizarre as my behaviour might have been, he thought it was bearable. I probably had left home before I'd even left home in reality. From about the age of 18, I was spending less and less time there, either hitching around Europe, as I said, or staying at friends' houses. When I came back from Europe after those 3 months in Amsterdam, the drug input was becoming such that my last trip in Amsterdam was a bad one that lasted for 3 days. I decided I had to get a job to make me enough money to buy the things I wanted for me to succeed in the arts in some way. So to be able to get cameras, to be able to get amplifiers, to be able to get guitars, I needed something that paid a lot of money in a quick period of time. So I actually became a postman. And I worked all the hours under the sun. It was great for working overtime, so I was there most of the time rather than at home. I first, then, if you want to say, officially left home when I was 20. I had everything sort of in place by then, and I'd met a friend who became my first partner, and he said, well, why don't you just move in with me? So I did that, and shortly after I was in New York. So that's how it all came together. It all happened apparently at the same time, along with punk rock. It was about 1975 I realised that in being in Britain there was a vast emptiness. There was a vacuum. You'd gone through the 60s, then you'd had the glam rock period for a while in Britain, but there was nothing really outside of David Bowie or Roxy Music you could equate to that there was any sort of chance of being involved in a real way with it rather than just being a spectator. And so in 1975 I remember making the decision that one day I had hair down to almost my waist, and the next day I had it all cut off, and I started not wearing flares. I started wearing just all black, and it was pretty much like a French existentialist look. There was a film called 400 Blows, which that sort of look affected me, and I thought, no, that's the way I want to be. This is dead. This is the past. I've gone through it. I don't know where the future is going to be, but I do not equate to that anymore, what has been. And then the odd thing was I started noticing other people dressing slightly differently in London. There was one occasion on the tube, I was walking around, there was someone else. He had short hair, he had drain-pipe trousers, straight trousers. In those days, in 1975 or 6, it was impossible to get them. And I thought, well, you look odd, you look different. He clocked me as well. He looked at me as we walked by each other. And then you started hearing murmurings of this new thing, this new musical genre or movement, whatever you want to call it. And you started seeing the odd posters to the Sex Pistols concerts, which were, going to attract your attention. It was what we called the gay cowboy poster with the two guys with the Stetsons and their cocks touching. There was one poster for them. We're using that as an advert, and it's bound to catch your eye, and there's something different going on. And I'd met Tony Wakeford by then. We'd met on, of all things, an anti-fascist demonstration, which should amuse some people. And we were the Antifa of the day. But we'd been talking about other things, and I knew he played bass in what was called a pub rock group, and he knew I was learning how to play guitar. And then there was the moment when the Sex Pistols appeared on British television in late 1976, which resulted in the filth and the fury, that phrase that was coined by the British press the next day, and everything changed for me. I thought I'd been waiting for a group like this. This is it. How do I get involved in this? And very soon after, Tony phoned me and said, have you heard of punk rock? I said, yes. Do you want to form a band? Yes. And it started like that.